train teams to be able to work together, to be able to learn how to communicate, to learn a process that's safe enough that you can share what you're feeling, and also how to give feedback in a way that's uplifting, that's supporting, instead of demoralizing and damaging. This is a skill that people don't necessarily have. You can work your way up a company, but it doesn't mean you know how to talk to people. It doesn't mean you know how to manage people. My name is Shlomo Slatkin. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I'm certified in something called Imago Therapy. It's a couples modality. I'm a workshop presenter, and I'm also on the faculty. I train other therapists to do Imago Therapy. And I work with couples through 2-day intensives, and I also work with businesses, helping both employees and CEOs be able to resolve conflict and to maximize their productivity as a team.
Talk to me more about why that's important.
It was created about in the 80s by Dr. Harville Hendricks and his wife Helen Kelly Hunt. They wrote a book called Getting the Love You Want. Harville wanted to understand why the dream becomes a nightmare, why the dream of romantic love quickly turns into what seems to be for a lot of couples a nightmare, where to the extent that we have a 50% divorce rate in this country. And to understand why that happens, why couples fight, and then why does anybody really fight? It's a really comprehensive understanding of humans, and especially in relationships, and at least when it started, more of the focus on romantic love relationships and marriage. It's a whole theory of why we choose our partner. Why out of all the other people we could have picked, why we picked the person that we picked. There's a whole theory based on Imago. We have an unconscious image of our ideal partner. We're looking to attract somebody unconsciously who's going to remind us of the positive and negative characteristics of our parents. Well, if our childhood wasn't so great, why on earth would anyone do that? Of course, it's not happening consciously, but the theory is that marriage is the unfinished business of childhood, and it's for the purpose of growth and healing. It gives us an opportunity to create almost the same laboratory conditions, but be able to get it right this time. The challenge is we're not aware of that. So that's kind of part of the process, helping couples become aware of that the romantic stage is normal. The power struggle that ensues afterwards is also normal and inevitable, but it's not the end. There's a third stage, which is called the conscious marriage. As we become conscious of the conflict that we experience and realize that it's not just about our partner, what they're doing to us, but it's more about our own story and our own baggage that we bring from our past, we begin to be less defensive. We can have more free will to be intentional and choose how we respond to our spouse. In addition to that, it teaches couples very specific skills on how to communicate, how to create emotional safety in the relationship. And when we have that emotional safety, instead of being stuck in our reactive brain, we can show up as our best selves and create the future that we want together. It's a very powerful modality of couples therapy. I mean, we just did a couples workshop yesterday, and it was just amazing to see the couples coming in 2 days before, where they were at and where they were when they left. It's so touching. It's so rewarding. It's just because it's making a difference not only in their lives, but in the lives of their children and all of those who come after them. It's very powerful work. It's very healing. I love doing it.
How long have you been doing it now?
Professionally, I've been involved for about 20 years.
Okay.
Personally involved 22 years, because when my first child was born, my wife and I went to Imago Therapy for our own marriage, and that changed our relationship. I don't know if we'd still be here if not for it. I was getting my master's in counseling psychology at the time, and the therapist said, why don't you do it? There's a training coming up. Why don't you do the training to become certified? And that's what I did. I remember thinking, we had to do something about this. We need to get help, or this is not going to last like this. It got too painful. I think when we got married, we got married pretty quickly. We knew each other for, 6 weeks, got engaged, and then we got married 3 months later. That's kind of typical in my circles, in Jewish circles. I know in the regular world that's kind of like, maybe it sounds a little bit crazy, but but we had deep conversations about what we wanted. We were dating for the sake of marriage. It wasn't casually dating. Basically, we thought things were going to be amazing. We just thought we could communicate. We thought things were great, and we began experiencing tension, and my wife would get upset about things, and the way that she would react about it was very scary for me. She got annoyed with me about maybe how I did things, or my opinions about things. Like maybe I was like a little stubborn. I would say push each other's buttons, and we began to fight about things, and it was more and more. And we always have a dragger and a draggy. I was kind of the dragger. My wife It's funny because her parents got divorced when she was 11, and that made a big impact on her life. And she always said never going to have the type of relationship her parents had. And she thought things, of course, would be better. And she was kind of shocked that she needed help and that things were not, that she didn't, she saw what she saw. She saw that when things don't go well, then people just run away or disconnect. And my motto was, okay, my parents are still together after 50 years. Now we're committed. We got to make it work. It was very scary. It was just, the volatility was, for me, it was not something I was so comfortable with. And thank God I had a colleague that referred me to Imago, and they specifically to the therapist I went to, because they went to him also. And then my wife's hairdresser also referred her, mentioned Imago. So we thought it wasn't just me like who thought of it. She also had the idea. Might as well give it a try. We went, and after the first 90-minute session, we felt reconnected again. It didn't make everything better all of a sudden. We still had challenges, but we saw a light at the end of the tunnel. We continued going, working through a lot, and we got to a much better place. Life does get in the way, and there's stressors, and we've been married about 24 years.
Something you said was really important. You said you had found full of responsibility in the relationship, and you identified that. You also mentioned that your wife, partner, has been the product of divorce. I'll tell you a little bit about me, just to kind of connect the dots. I'm the product of divorce. My wife is also the product of divorce. We had that in common. One of the things I learned from my wife that I had to be a better man about was I had this bad habit when we first started dating. And you said you got married in 6 weeks?
We dated in 6 weeks and got married 3 months after that. Yeah, we were
3 months
engaged for
after
three
that.
months.
I have yet to see anybody beat my record of 9 months. So you're the first person I've met in a while. Man, 3 months. I thought 9 months for us was fast. The thing that I had a bad habit was whenever there would be a fight, whenever there would be something that was challenging, I had this bad habit in the beginning where I thought you had to leave the room. Like, just being real with you. Thinking about your 5-step plan, the books you've written, and please speak to that in this question. What role did I need to change in it? I had to learn that was bad, but what role do I needed to improve on as a partner? Tony Robbins says that like 95% of your happiness comes from who you decide to spend the rest of your life with.
You walked out of the room to avoid conflict, or tell me a little bit more about why you did that.
I always thought when you got in a fight and it got too tense, walk away. I learned that from like television growing up. That's the only frame I had growing up in South Florida, not having a lot. I had to self-learn that this was bad. It was my wife who really held my feet to the fire. We're not doing that. We're going to talk this out. Speak to what are important roles that not only I needed to change, that being one of them, but roles that both partners need to play when those times of tension, those conflict happens.
I think one thing that, I mean, most couples can do better, all couples, is to work on controlling their reactivity. It's very hard in the heat of the moment because it's hard to listen to something that, especially if you disagree with it, you have a different opinion about it. It's hard for you just to expect to, like, I'm just going to hear you listen, especially if you're not really talking to me in a safe way. I think that people need to take a moment I don't think you were doing anything malicious. You just thought that that's what you're supposed to do. Obviously, that was not something that your wife liked too much because she wanted to deal with it. Some people walk away because they're not committed. Just talking about my book, the first step is commitment, and that it's the one thing that it's almost a prerequisite. If you're committed, you can get through anything. If you're not committed, you can have the stupidest issues that you're arguing about, and the relationship won't last. Sometimes even having one person hold the commitment for the relationship, one person not giving up, and that is what, at some point, the other partner comes around. Because if I'm committed to doing whatever I can to make this relationship work, and I work on myself, then my spouse will respond in kind. But if I don't even care either, and I'm too busy, and I'm also want out, it's not going to last. That's definitely an important thing. Sometimes people walk away because of that. But I think it's also about being committed to the relationship means you be creative. You try to learn ways. You try to figure out, what do I need to do to make this work? And there could be a host of answers. Same goes for any relationship in the corporate world also. Like, I'm not just running away from my job because it's uncomfortable. I'm committed to working this out. I might decide this is not working. Both people don't want to work on this together, but I'm here now, and I'm going to do what I can to be a better boss or be a better employee. I'll be a better spouse. Listening and sharing, learning how to talk in a way that someone else can hear you. Because it's fine to say you want to talk, but if talking means I'm going to yell and scream at you and blame you, then and shame you, I can understand why you don't want to be listening to that. Talking it through means learning skills to be able to have a safe conversation where both people can feel heard, both people can feel understood, and both people can feel safe enough to open up and share what's really going on. I think it's sorely missing in all relationships.
How many people would you say you've trained now in your career, if you had to give it a number?
I'd say thousands. We actually have an online self-study program, like a course that's based on the book. In that, I say that it's a logical steps, but at the same time, start where you can. The last step is called love infusions, and that's positive things, daily appreciations, caring behaviors, having fun together. For some couples, if things are so bad, like, how can I commit to this person? I need a reason to commit. I just need to connect with them first. And then once I connect with them, I get back to step one. Although it's a logical progression and it's easiest when you go that way, any of the steps can be applied and get you back to where you need to go to restore your marriage. Commitment for me is a prerequisite because I saw couples that were recovering from infidelity and they were successful. And then I saw couples that I was just thinking, why can't they make this work? They're not really dealing with such major issues. But the woman was told by her boss that he has an apartment available for her by the end of April. She has it in the back of her mind that I have an exit here. I'm not really fully committed to making this work because I'm anxious I'm not going to have a place to live. And I have a place to live if I decide in the next 3 weeks that I'm getting divorced. So I begin to see that with my couples that I've been working with. And I realize, what are the successful ingredients for a successful relationship? Got to start off with that commitment. If you have commitment, you can make it through anything. If you don't, you can't make it through even the smallest squabbles. But at the same time, if things are so painful, why should I be committed to this person? And that's why when we do the work with them couple, we help them understand. I think the Imago is very helpful. The theory, once people understand that their problems are not a liability, but really an asset, and they're really in the right relationship because they pick someone who will help them heal their childhood, that can give them the buy-in to actually be able to recommit. Because when it's painful, people need a reason to commit. Some people just, they have this moral belief till death do us part, and even if it's difficult, I'm going to do whatever I can. But other people are just, they want to leave. It really hurts. You need to be able to show them that this nightmare is really tailor-made for you to actually create your dream relationship.
Can you talk to me a little more about caring behaviors? Let's peel that onion. What have you seen that if more people did that, couples would thrive, relationships would thrive?
I see that couples mean well and they do try to give to their partner. The problem is a lot of times their partner does not experience the love. I recall a client that I had once where the husband, he was extremely verbal, expressive, really mushy about how much he loved his wife and how wonderful she was. And one day she piped up and said, "I don't really think that you love me." What do you mean? I mean, I tell you all the time. And she said, "Words don't do anything for me. What I need is a box of chocolates. That makes me feel loved." Very depressed, very flat affect, no expression at all. She was definitely not telling him that she loved him. "What do you mean? I take care of the children. I make your dinner." We saw that basically they were both loving each other in their own way, in their own love language, but neither one of them felt loved. And this is a concept that, Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages, but I found it very profound because I find that people are giving this husband's love language was words of affirmation. He expressed love through words, and that's how I received love. Her love language, I would say acts of service or gifts. That's how she expressed it. They're both speaking different languages. It's like if you speak Japanese and you want to speak to somebody who only knows Greek, you can talk to them Japanese until you're blue in the face, but they're not going to have a clue what you're saying. It doesn't mean that it's not okay to tell your wife you love her if that's not her love language. Of course, it's a nice thing. She'll appreciate it, but it doesn't mean as much as if you're really giving what they need. And we find that the thing that our spouse needs is usually the hardest thing for us to give them. This is in all aspects of a relationship, and even in the love language. We'll find somebody who he really needs encouragement. He really needs appreciation. He really needs words. And he'll marry someone who has a really hard time doing that. They're more into actions, make you coffee in the morning. I do the laundry. And for the person who needs words, they need it so bad. And for the person who needs actions, that's what they need to feel better. And everyone has their own story. A lot of times it goes back to childhood. They didn't get that verbal appreciation and approval as a kid. They need that from their wife or husband, or they had to do everything as a kid. They had no one that would, they need, and they're looking for someone who's going to lessen the load. It goes very deep. But the idea with the exercise, what we teach couples is to share with their spouse, what are the things that made you feel cared for in the past in your relationship? What are the things that make you currently feel cared for? And what are the things you would like that maybe you've never experienced? And when couples share that list, then they know, I have a to-do list. Now I know exactly what you need. Instead of me just giving you what I need, I'm going to give you what you need. I'm going to learn how to speak your language. That's what we help couples learn how to do. And it makes a big impact. It's surprising, just that can help people feel more secure in their relationship and more loved.
Is that something you would recommend to all couples, regardless? You would write out that they should spend times where, tell me about a time you felt loved. The second one was, I think, tell me what currently makes you loved.
But it currently makes you feel loved, and specific behaviors. So when you hold my hand, when you give me a hug, when you tell me you love me, when we go on a walk, when you make me coffee, when you buy me a box of chocolates, specific items. Because if you just say like I feel love when you love me, or I feel love you don't, or something negative, I feel love when you don't interrupt me. I want something that you can have a list that I can just look at my list every day and say, okay, here's 2 or 3 things I'm going to do for you. I'm going to make you coffee. I'm going to take you for a walk. I'm going to text you that I appreciate you. And it
Yeah.
gives people a guidance because couples have conversations about what they're frustrated about. And it's definitely important to learn how to do that. But the next step for some people is missing. The follow through is missing. The follow through is very important for a lot of people. Having that follow through and having something very specific your partner tells you. It's not a list of demands. It's a list of things that this is what I like. You can take it and do the ones that you're comfortable doing.
I'm glad you made that distinction. I would probably say, like, my love language is words of affirmation. Me personally, for my wife, I would probably say quality time. She's told me I'm her best friend. When I was dating years ago, I heard this statement that if you ever had to weigh your options, that you're probably with the wrong person. And I remember hearing that in my 20s thinking, wow, that's a really good statement. And now I'm in my 40s. And I look back at that statement. I have 2 kids. We're busy. You have 5 kids. The balance gets crazy. When I argue with my wife in the car, I had to get something the other day. I know I shouldn't be mad. It was raining and I had to put on a raincoat and it got murky outside and dirty.
I think that we tend to get comfortable. I believe that when people do the work, at least I've seen, because I work with couples usually in like a 2-day intensive format, it really makes a big impact. They see their relationship different, and we do follow ups afterwards. So we help integrate it. They get into the habit of being different, being more intentional, learning how to listen, not get reactive. But we are reactive beings. I mean, our first MO is to stay alive and protect ourselves. When we feel threatened, we're going to go back to that. It does take a lot of effort and time to get to a place where you just have no reactivity at all. It's not so easy. I think, though, that I've seen couples make, I would say, they're not as quick to throw in the towel once they've done the work because they see that they know why they're struggling. Hey, I'm not doing the work, but I know why I'm in this relationship. I know we're having trouble. We're falling kind of out of practice. Sometimes you get comfortable. You don't have to be as sensitive or intentional. And then you go back into reactivity mode without learning how to listen. It's important for people to make time regularly to nourish their relationship. And sometimes people need a refresher just to remind themselves about it. And I tell, in our online course, I tell people, this isn't something you're just going to listen to one time and then listen to it over and over and over again until it becomes part of your subconscious so that you're naturally thinking in these terms. The more repetition, the more it will become ingrained and change you as a person. But it's natural for people to clip back. But I think the difference is that once people do the work, they recover quicker. The fights are not as bad. We know if we have a major fight or disagreement, we have something that we can use. We have a tool to be able to communicate and to make a time to talk about it. Before it was just, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no skills. I don't know what I'm going to do about this situation, about the relationship in general. But now I know I'm not looking for fights, but if something happens, I know we can have a safe way to work on it. You know, maybe not in the moment, but after the fact. And that's very comforting for people because it's empowering, and you know that you're not going to be just going back to square one.
My wife and I, we go to church every week. We pray every night, and I know you're Jewish. We're Catholic, which is I like all people. I'm a very accepting person. I'm a very big includer. Whoever his background is, as long as they're a good person. Talk to me about how you've seen different relationships that come from different backgrounds and belief systems, how they can win.
In theory, the tools for people to get along, it's all about respecting people's differences and being able to make space for other people, even if they disagree, whether they have a different political party or religion or culture. It does add another thing you have to work through. And depending on your beliefs and how strong they are,
Yeah.
and depending on how they impact your life, it can make a huge difference. If you're a very observant person, religious person, like it's going to be a challenge to have somebody who doesn't see things the same way. And I'm not saying what people should do or not do. I think sometimes people change when they get married. You might think you're marrying someone who's just like you, and then something happens 5 years down the line, and they decide they changing their whole viewpoint. But you can't ever predict the future. But there's enough complications for couples just dealing with people's personalities. It does make it more difficult. I'm not going to pretend that everything is hunky dory. It does make it more difficult, especially when your belief system is. Let's say you want to go to church every week, and you marry someone who's atheist, then that could work. But if you wanted them to go with you, that's going to be hard, and that's going to be it. You want to have a family, probably it's better to marry someone who wants to have children too. If you marry someone who doesn't want to have children, but you want to have children, you're already setting yourself up for a very contentious issue, and it's a very personal. I mean, I think anything religion and having children, these are all like very personal issues, be very contentious. In the corporate world, it's a little bit different because you're not marrying them. You go home at night. It can still be challenging if you see things different, but certain things you can compartmentalize. Your personal opinions on your sleeve, let's say who you voted for president or things like that. It doesn't have to come into the boardroom. My wife's parents were, one was a Democrat, one was a Republican.
Really?
So that didn't help. That's not the reason they got divorced, but it's funny because my mother-in-law changed.
Okay.
Years later, she changed. So people do change their political views even. But I mean, you see what in our country, it's just so contentious. And imagine if one thing to vote one way and the other. It's one thing to be like a very passionate about your political beliefs on the opposite side. It can cause conflict if you can't make space for another and to be able to really listen and to realize, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. I don't have to agree with you, but I can respect where you're coming from.
In the corporate world, I still see in the corporate world where lines start to blur in my experience in past companies I've worked with, where sometimes I've even seen managers get way too friendly, but it's got a total different thing.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had was couples often come guarded to your training, I'm assuming. Is that fair to assume? They take your content, they start to come into Shlomo's world, that they're guarded. Do people become guarded when they start to take this improvement relationships because you think, one, they don't want to be there, two, someone's making them be there, or three, there's something else?
So there's a dragger and a draggy. There's one person who really wants to be there, the other one comes along for the ride. That can be guarded. It's very vulnerable to open yourself up to, first of all, to admit you have a problem, and then to share in front of a third party. And it's also scary, not even the fact that you're going to a third party, but just to talk about these difficult things with your spouse, because usually when you talk about them at home, it has not gone so well. But you're already kind of on the defensive and waiting for the shoe to drop. It makes sense why people are guarded, and that's why the most important thing that we talk to couples about is creating safety. And it's all about creating a very safe process where both people can feel safe enough to be able to open up and share. And we see that in the beginning, while people can be very guarded, we see them begin to open up because they feel that they're in a safe place. And that's what I aim to create when I'm working with couples, that safe atmosphere.
You've been married over 20 years now?
It's going to be 24. Yeah, 24 next month.
That's pretty cool. What would you say from going from where you were able to identify there's different layers of emotional intelligence? I forget the exact terminology. You have to be self-aware because I don't have my notes in front of me. I'm just speaking from the heart with questions in front of me. What are some things in all your years of experience that you do now still to keep that marriage going this long that other people who have not achieved that could learn from you to level up and improve their relationship skills and their personal life so it doesn't bleed into their professional life and other areas?
Part of it is commitment. It's funny because on one hand, I'm very sensitive. Things hurt me more than other people. Other people are just like, I can brush it off. Things hurt me a little more than other people. I'm more likely to get hurt, but I have that internal strength of commitment that I have that makes this is not an option. I think it's not an option. I think also what I've learned from this work is that instead of focusing on blaming the other person, taking ownership, that goes with your self growth, that component that I realized that I need to take ownership for my reaction, understand why I react the way that I do, as opposed to focusing on my spouse as the bad guy. We say if it's hysterical, it's historical. It's 10% that my wife makes some type of comment or talks to me in a certain way, but it's 90% of why I react that way. And that's my stuff that I need to own. It's not easy. It definitely isn't easy. I mean, I have to think twice. Then if you weren't such and such, and I have to realize this is what I need to work on. Sometimes we say that our partner holds the blueprint for our growth. When our spouse complains about us, as painful as it is to hear, they're basically showing us, this is what you need to do. I know that you can grow. I know that you can be a bigger person. This is exactly what you need to do. So instead of looking at like, oh, you're criticizing me and me getting upset and feeling like a victim, it's just a natural reaction. Thank you for sharing that with me. Not, you don't have to tell them that, but thank you for sharing that with me. And how can I use this to better myself and to grow and to become the best person that I can be? I have to remind myself of that, but I think that that's definitely something that has helped me stick it out. And I mean, of course, it's not like what it used to be, fighting all the time, and our relationship's much better. It's much more peaceful. But if people have that perspective, it can change your dynamic. Otherwise, you're going to have fights. You're going to have your partner's going to do things to annoy you, and if you're just going to be like a victim the whole time, and you can point fingers and be in pain and want to leave constantly.
You said 10% historical, 90% historical, correct?
Whatever they're doing is the 10%. The 10% is the trigger, is what your spouse is doing. 90% is what it's triggering within you, the reaction.
Okay.
Because
I never heard it that way.
why if I would take a survey of 10 other couples, if this happened in your marriage, how would you react? Everyone would probably react differently. There's certain things, nobody likes to be yelled at, but some people's respond very different. Some people, I would say they have a disproportionate response. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. And that's where we want to look and see, wow, if I'm getting all eaten up about something, worked up about something, it's more about my stuff than what the other person. It doesn't mean it does not condone what was done. It doesn't mean I can call you a name and it's your problem because you react to it. You're too sensitive and you have your childhood issue and that's why you react. No, I doesn't give me license to treat the other person poorly, but for them to react, it's for their benefit. They need to be aware of why they're acting so strongly, because it's more about them than about what defending party. And if it's always about the offending party, then you're just going to be a victim and you're going to be miserable.
I like that. That was pretty cool. I like what you said there. I know me personally, one of the things my therapist tells me is I have like a blind narrator. Are you familiar with, you ever heard of the movie Gone Girl?
No,
Or
I'm
know
not
of
familiar
it?
with it.
So I won't spoil it, but it's one of those thriller movies where they show you like one part of the story and then like halfway through they show you the other part of the story. My therapist will say I have the tendency to have a blind narrator, is what she defines it. That's her definition. I actually, even though I've been in sales, corporate training, all that jazz, did stand-up comedy for a long time to get through college after being a dropout. I'm incredibly sensitive, me personally, especially after having kids. I remember the Disney movie Hercules, that song, I'll Go the Distance, came on while I was folding laundry once, and I just started crying like a baby. I don't even like this movie. I was like, why am I crying at this? I have those challenges. What would you say to that for somebody who could be overly sensitive? Because I'm putting myself on the table. I'm in the hot seat. As an overly sensitive man, what could I do to not overreact and get better? I'm giving you permission to totally like say what you want to say. Free runway, no negative consequences from me.
Sure. Don't worry, I'm gentle here. I would say, I mean, along with that historical, I would say, like, ask yourself when you're feeling hurt or sensitive, like, what's familiar about this for me? What does this remind me of from my childhood or other life experience that's painful? If you remember something, then you'll see that it's really you're getting triggered by that past event. And when the brain gets triggered, the brain can't distinguish between past, present, and future. The brain feels like they're back in that past. It's like PTSD. It's like
Yeah.
a soldier comes back to walking down a major city and they hear loud noise. They think they're back in combat when they're not. So that's what happens a lot. Say if your wife wanted to learn, was curious about what she does and how she might share in a way that might be more effective and not as hurtful. That could help you as well to be able to speak up for that. And then just to see what opportunity do I have to grow from this? How can I view this as an opportunity to overcome and to also to realize, let's just say like your wife got mad at you. How do I realize that the same way it's the 90-10 for you, it's also 90-10 for her? If she yells at you, instead of you reacting, realize and being hurt, maybe I don't know, I picked up the kids 5 minutes late from school, but I don't need to even defend myself. I don't need to be upset by her reaction. This obviously triggered her. I'm not saying you should tell her this, but
Yeah.
think in your mind, this obviously triggered her, and she's reacting very strongly. And I don't need to take it personally. I can be nice. I can apologize, but I don't need to get all worked up and take it personally. I think for sensitive people, we we see our partner react very strongly, and we just feel hurt, and it's more about their issue. Not that they have something wrong with them. I'm not saying,
Right.
they have like a personality disorder or something. Obviously, it triggered them, and they're going to call it quote unquote overreacting. I'm not saying to say overreacting, but
No.
they're disproportionately reacting, and that means it's their thing. Anytime they're being hysterical, it's also historical. And how can I even have compassion for that? You know what? I can imagine what that must have been like for them growing up, and I see why they're reacting this way to me. Okay, I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to be all upset. I can see it from a different perspective.
Or are there any key quotes you read every day that maybe you would mind sharing that helps you accountable to being better for your partner every day?
So I think about is you can be right or you can be in a relationship. We have the tendency to feel like we need to be right so much that at the expense of the relationship, but it's not a competition. If you listen long enough, everyone makes sense. That means getting curious, even though you don't want to, even though you feel defensive, to realize they make sense, even if I see differently. If it's hysterical, it's historical. I think that's helpful because it just helps me not only realize my reaction, but also not react to my spouse's reaction because I can take it personally. Those are some of the things that I find to be helpful one-liners to think about. Review constantly.
Is there anything you're promoting?
We have private intensives for couples with me or with on our website. That's the people that need more private work. We do have our online course, which is my wife and I distilled into a audio video program. One other thing I also do is to mention I train therapists and other professionals that want to learn how to facilitate people being able to communicate and resolve conflict and create safety. We just finished for cohorts. I have a new cohort. We have some dates coming up for 2-day introduction, first 2 days of the training, and then in 2026 the full training. And that's great for people that are either licensed therapists. There's a therapist track, and then for coaches or other helping professionals or people that just want to learn how to learn this. If they're a therapist or become certified Imago therapists, and they could work with other couples.
I got into therapy because I used to report to a toxic boss for 2 years that was very psychologically damaging. My wife actually had recommended therapy long before this event. And because of that, it actually launched me into therapy. I guess sometimes the bad does come with the good.
Even though it's painful.
How can people in the workplace, new managers, or even seasoned managers leverage all this so they can be better with their teams and drive more rapport?
It's all about what we call being relationally intelligent. Being able to understand, just as we're learning how to be emotionally intelligent, learning how to understand about relationships and how to create safe relationships. I train teams to be able to work together, to be able to learn how to communicate, to learn a process that's safe enough that you can share what you're feeling, and also how to give feedback in a way that's uplifting, that's supporting, instead of demoralizing and damaging. You can work your way up a company, but it doesn't mean you know how to talk to people. It doesn't mean you know how to manage people. And I think that when people know how to talk to each other, they're going to have the employees are going to be happy. They're going to want to work there, and they're going to want to put in their 110%. But when there's discord, people aren't happy at the workplace. People don't want to share. People don't want to give their good ideas because they're afraid of the, the potential response. So there's studies to show this. Google did, a man named Matt Kawasaki did a study about psychological safety in the workplace at Google, and he saw that there was much more, the performance was much better for teams that felt psychologically safe. And it's exactly what we've been talking about all these years in Imago Therapy, the same thing. When the brain is safe, you can show up and access your full brain, prefrontal cortex, and you can have all the creativity and solutions to thrive.